where we highlight the journeys of successful young leaders.
Imposter syndrome, it's basically a fear of self-doubt, worth, and your value in, something that you're doing, right? It's this constant doubt of, am I good enough? They're going to catch me out. I don't belong here. And I felt that through various stages of my career. But before we go ahead with those examples, I want us to reframe it as the imposter monster. The reason being is that language is very important when we're talking about these things, because syndrome suggests that it's a biologically, genetically inherited disease that you can't get rid of. Labeling it as monster suggests that, like you have a nightmare because you've had a bad day, but it doesn't actually belong there and you need to kind of shoo it away. Or when you have a monster in your dreams, it's usually an indication of something that's impacting you and you need to address it right. So that's why I prefer using imposter monster, because it contextualizes the fear. Networking from a place of shared experience reduces the anxiety on having to communicate with people based on your accolades and successes, but rather what you took away and a connection. And then naturally that progresses into, so tell me about yourself. I'm not a technical cybersecurity professional, but I am someone who's able to contextualize cybersecurity in the context of the everyday person. And when I got up on stage and I articulated the cyber dangers of everyday AI products to people and I saw their eyes light up, I said, yeah, I'm in the right industry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joyce Masvaya, and welcome to Dear Future Leaders, a youth empowerment hub where we help young people to grow and thrive. Today, we have with us Yemurai Rabvukwa, and she calls herself the STEM Bae. Hi, Yamurai.
Hello.
I'm delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you.
What inspires me most about Yemurai's journey is that it challenges the traditional idea that success must follow a straight line. You studied chemistry and later built a successful career in cybersecurity, becoming a respected technology leader, international speaker, and advocate for greater diversity and inclusion in the technology sector. I also admire how you openly speak about imposter syndrome, nonlinear career journeys, and the importance of continuous learning. Many young people feel pressured to have everything figured out immediately after uni, and your story is a powerful reminder that success is not always about following a predetermined path, but about being willing to learn, to adapt, and embrace new opportunities. Your work in cybersecurity, leadership, and emerging technologies is helping to shape important conversations about the future of work, and I believe there is so much that young people can learn from your experiences. You were recently at number 10 Downing Street with the former Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and that's quite impressive. Today, we're excited to learn more about your journey, your leadership lessons, and navigating a career transition. So let's dive in. We're going to start with your journey. Yamurai, can you take us back to graduation day? You had just completed a degree in chemistry. Did you ever imagine that one day you would build a career in cybersecurity? Thank you.
Yes. What a journey it's been. I think last time I was at university was on graduation, so maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But I remember at the end of my degree, I realized that I didn't want to work in a lab or pursue the medical field. As a Zimbabwean, you are often encouraged to pursue careers that are supposedly safe. So accountant, lawyer, doctor, and, medic. And so my aspirations of doing chemistry initially was to become a doctor and do postgraduate medicine. So when I finished my degree, I realized I don't want to interact with the sciences. I want to do something completely different. So what was pivotal in inspiring me to change into the tech field was there was a lady called Yasmin. She literally wrote a tweet talking about the fact that she earned 6 figures at the age of 27 or 26. And she was complaining that in comparison to her white male colleagues, she wasn't actually earning enough. And I said to myself, these are the problems that I want to have in life. I want to complain that even though I'm on 6 figures, I'm not earning as much as my peers. And so that journey is really what sparked my movement into this field of tech. So what happened was at that time, there was an upskilling initiative that was promoted by my university's Women in STEM Society. So that was looking at cloud computing. So I partook in that. And then after the 12-week bootcamp, I was fortunate enough to land a role at a health tech startup. So that role at the health tech startup, in essence, was at the intersection of my chemistry skills that I developed in my degree, but also technology. So we were looking at the ways in which you can apply technology into the sciences field to find innovative ways to detect for coronavirus. And it was at that moment I realized that wow, okay, technology has so much power in revolutionizing the industry that I've just graduated from. And B, that there was opportunity for me to leverage my skills in chemistry and complement it with technology, and that nothing had gone to waste as much, even though I had thought that, my skill set had gone to waste. So that was really eye opening for me to realize that everything that you've learned, even up until this point, actually provides you opportunities in the future that you may not necessarily recognize. And so I was at the health tech startup for 6 months or so. And then what happened was that the stint at the health tech startup ended and I was back on the job market, unemployed and jobless. I was basically stacking shelves in Sainsbury's, which is a UK retail store. Once I was stacking shelves in Sainsbury's, an organization called Coding Black Females advertised that they had a recruitment event with a financial services institution at the time. So I just thought, I've got nothing to lose. Let me just join, see what happens. So at the recruitment event, the hiring managers were just talking about the work that they did. And one of whom was my cybersecurity manager. He was talking about protecting the banks from DDoS attacks and bot attacks, but also the cool work that they were doing. So I thought, you know what, even though I don't have the technical knowledge of cybersecurity, I like my manager because like someone I can work under and grow. And number two, I'm interested in this and I'm keen to upskill and learn and apply the transferable skills that I bring from my chemistry degree, the cloud computing program, into the field of cybersecurity. I didn't know what that would look like, but as someone who'd got a first class in chemistry, I felt like I could do anything really. So I applied for it, highlighted my transferable skills, hoping for the best really. And one thing led to another. And here I am nearly 5 years into the field of cybersecurity, which is amazing. And so, yeah, it was just being inspired by a Black woman talking about their success within the tech industry. And then the second thing was just putting myself out there, being visible to hiring managers and recruiters and just shooting my shot. And the rest is history.
Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of young people actually relate to the issue of just pursuing safe careers so that they can secure their future. So let's move on to the next question. Your career path is often described as squiggly rather than linear. What were some of the unexpected twists that ultimately led you to where you are today? Thank you.
Yeah, so I was a bright student at university. I had a Spring Insight Week. I studied abroad in Canada. I studied abroad in China. I had a wealth of work experience and I thought, yes, I'm going to get a graduate job. Fantastic. The reality of the postgraduate life hit when I wasn't able to secure a graduate role despite my career successes and things like that. And so I had to find an alternative route into the corporate world that didn't follow this traditional pathway that I had planned to get into as part of my university degree, right? The plan is you go to university, you get a graduate role within a pharmaceutical industry or the biomed industry, but I didn't get that. So it was trying to find ways of success outside of the norm because the linear pathway wasn't being presented to me at the time. So for me, that looked like, acknowledging this is my reality. I don't have a graduate job. What can I do? Okay, I'm going to upskill in an area that I know is growing and see where it goes from there. Did that for 12 weeks. At the end of the 12 weeks, then I was, searching around, looking for opportunities that aligned with this newfound skill set that I'd learned and my chemistry skills. That's when this health tech startup came about. Never thought about planning. I'd never planned to do this. It was never my intention. I just took whatever opportunities were presented to me at the time of me searching for them. So then that ended. Okay, cool. The next pivot was, okay, what's the next opportunity that came about? Coding Black Females are having an event. Okay, let's see what they have to talk about. Because before that, I was thinking, like, what business do I have working in as a tech specialist in a bank? Like, what benefit is there? But me just being like, you know what? Why not? What is there to lose by me attending, me listening, me asking, me applying? What is there to lose? And it's through that sort of taking opportunities that are in front of you, looking for leverage points is ultimately what led me to be here, albeit not in the linear way.
Wow, thank you so much. I truly believe that, like you say, there's no harm in trying. You won't lose anything in trying. So let's move back to your gen again. Many young people feel pressure to have everything figured out immediately after uni. Looking back, what would you say to your younger self during that period of uncertainty?
Yeah, I would say so. Recently, I've come across this analogy about our careers, right? And it's in the Open to Work book. It's this idea that our careers are climbing walls rather than career ladders. So ultimately, you have an end goal or a destination. And most of the time, it's driven by job stability, finances, and then maybe passions and interests. And so ultimately, at the end of the climbing wall, that's where you want to get to. You want money, you want job stability, and you want, passions and interests. So the analogy of the climbing wall suggests that there is an end goal, but as you're climbing the wall, you're figuring it out and you might fall and start again. But when you start again, you have a foundation on which to make that climb of the wall easier. And your climbing of the wall is unique to you. So for you, it might work that you go on this side of the climbing wall, but for somebody else, it goes on that side of the climbing wall. So I would say the climbing wall analogy when it comes to my career would give me a lot more security in acknowledging the journey of graduating and starting my career. And I think the other thing is this idea of don't focus on job titles, focus on skills. So a lot of us are kind of hyper fixated on, your identity is based on a job title. And the world of work is changing and evolving from job titles because what was a software engineer now isn't what they were 5 years ago. The responsibilities of a doctor now isn't what they were 5 years ago. But actually, what remains at heart is the core skills that you add to and evolve to adapt to the needs of your environment, where you work, and the current climate, right? So don't get too hyper fixated on a job title. Focus on developing a set of skills that are highly valuable and that you can apply in different contexts. And the third thing is we are now entering a space where we can become entrepreneurs in our own right and create employment for ourselves in new and unconventional ways. So let me give you some context. So I was speaking to my cousin the other day. He's a gaming designer graduate, but he hasn't got a job. However, he's currently he's helping his dad, fix people's gardens and things like that. That the one dimensional view would indicate he's just going to do gardening. And I was like, here is an employment opportunity for yourself and an opportunity to develop your skills that you develop in gaming is that you can actually add technology into the process of labor work. So, for example, could you set up a website for your family company so that people can have access to the work you're doing? So now you're applying your games design skill set in a new and unique way. And it's a way of you getting skills as well as opening up door of opportunity for employment. Could it be you create a CRM, right, for the clients you've worked with? And it sounds silly, like you might think your neighbor. You don't see your neighbor as a client because in the traditional blue collar jobs, it's kind of informal. But the formalization of the blue collar sector is actually a great opportunity for people to find new unique ways of modernizing it and employment. So I said, create a website, great. CRM, all the neighbors you've worked with, get their contact details, make a list of when they contacted you. Then you can create an automation system that sends them an email to be like, hey, we worked with you on this garden project. Would you like us to help you again? So start thinking of creative ways that you could be an entrepreneur in even the most boring or blue collar or informal work, because that is where the greatest opportunity is going to be in. So even when I had that conversation with him, web designer, okay, CRM management, marketing, social media, just from being a laborer and applying his gaming skill set in this new context, that's 4 avenues of employment or skills that he could develop and even hire freelancers to support him in growing that business. So I think when students are worried about their future, they need to start being creative in how they can apply their skill sets in new and unique contexts that sit outside the norm, because that is where you'll find the least amount of competition. That is where you could end up actually making a lot of money and creating a unique career pathway that is unique to you. It's a bit like in my instance as well, right? I worked at a health tech startup that specifically required someone with knowledge of chemistry and technology. And that, I would say, interdisciplinary careers is what I call it. So, yeah.
Wow, thank you so much. That's an honest reflection. Let's move on to breaking into tech and cybersecurity. Many people think cybersecurity is only for coders and highly technical specialists. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about careers in the field?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest misconceptions about the industry is we have a very limited view on the careers that are there. So you're either software engineer, data analyst, or an engineer at some capacity. But the UK Cybersecurity Council have defined 15 specialisms within cybersecurity. So there are a range of roles within cybersecurity and different ways to contribute to the industry that sit outside of the technical stuff. One of the ways in which I encourage people to view how they could get into cybersecurity is what I call the art of leverage and transferable skills. So, for example, if you're a teacher, how you could contribute to the cybersecurity industry is to become a cyber awareness trainer. If you work in finance, you might want to work as a cybersecurity sales advisor. If you work as a lawyer, you might want to work in GDPR or cybersecurity law. So the field of technology actually invites and is open to people from different backgrounds because they have context of another domain or discipline that they may not necessarily have. And that is how the future of work is evolving. The future of work is requiring us to have technical knowledge, but also domain knowledge. And that's where you can understand, I have this gap, which is 50% of a role in tech. What could the other 50% be? So in my instance, in the cybersecurity context, if I were to go down that route, it would be, there's an area in cybersecurity called chemical security, OT/OT security, which is basically looking at the cybersecurity protections of manufacturing plants and chemical warehouses, right? So it's basically looking at the art of leverage. Okay, with the skill set that I have, how do I complement that in tech with a role that makes sense for me? And yeah, that's one of the ways I think about it. And every company is going to be a tech company, but they're using tech to provide a type of service anyway. And that's where your interdomain knowledge would come in and be really handy. The second thing I would say is sometimes the opportunity is knocking right in front of your door. So again, with the art of leverage, it's finding a role that is tech adjacent or cyber adjacent, in essence, leverages your transferable skills, but embeds more technology. But another really quick win actually is, can you move internally within your organization? So your organization will have a technical team, and within that technical team, it's going to be made up of different people. Literally network, connect with the technical team within your organization, ask them what they're doing, ask them, do you have any shadowing, any work experience, internships, apprenticeships? And what you'll find is that because organizations want to keep talent in-house, they actually support the internal mobility of their employees from one department to another, because it's pollinating information across departments about the company. So you might work in finance and then you move over to the tech team. The value that you bring to the tech team is helping them understand how to communicate the business value of any new technology that they're looking to implement, but also helping them understand that what maybe the tech team need to take into consideration when they're looking to buy a new technical vendor. So sometimes the opportunity is quite literally within your own company, within the tech team, and you just have a conversation. And they're like, yeah, do you know what? Come shadow me, or come and do this project or side thing. Another way to get into the tech industry through unconventional means is actually doing the same role, but within a tech company. So for example, if you work as a HR specialist within an education company, you could pivot and work as a HR specialist within a tech company. So yeah, those are the three things. Looking at roles that like the intersection of your domain and technology, looking internally to see whether there's what the tech team are up to, if they're hiring, and how you can support them. And the third thing is, can you do the same role in a tech or cyber company?
Thank you once again. Building on that, for someone with no technical background who wants to enter technology or cybersecurity today, I think you have answered this. Where would you advise them to start?
But if I were to start again, what would I do? That's an interesting question. I think the first thing that I would do is understand the different domains within tech, right? Because there's cyber, there's data, there's AI and cloud and software engineering, right? Understand those 5 disciplines. Once you understand those 5, that there are 5 disciplines, understand the main roles that make up those disciplines. So in cyber, the main ones might be incident response, cybersecurity analyst or whatever, data analyst, data engineer. And then in that research period, I'd say give it like a quarter of a year, right? Or even half a year, just researching into those different disciplines, trying to understand what they each entail. Once you've done your research, you then want to move towards the discipline or domain within tech that is of interest to you and pick maybe one of those roles that is high paying, high in demand, and learn that particular skill set. So you've researched the 5 domains. You're like, I'm really interested in cybersecurity domain. In cybersecurity, I can see these are the 2 roles that are of particular high interest or paying high or in most demand. Let me start researching into that. So then you embark maybe on a 6 to 12 month upskilling and learning journey so that you get the foundations and the foundational skills needed to pivot into that particular industry. One of the ways in which you can support in that journey of what do I like or what I don't like is actually attending industry events, because industry events allow you to understand the applications of that domain in real life. So you might go to the industry event. They might talk about the data side of healthcare. They might talk about the cyber side of healthcare. They might talk about the cloud side of healthcare. You going to industry events contextualizes those different domains and the impact they have within wider society. And then when you understand the contextualization of it, it will allow for you to understand what you're learning and why it's important. Because sometimes you can just be kind of, be like, I'm learning all this for what, right? The projects might be like create a calculator or something really trivial, right? But when you attend industry events, you're like, in the future, having this skill set could mean that I protect patients from a cyber attack that could save the NHS 50 million, as an example.
Thank you so much, Yemurai. Let's move on to confidence and imposter syndrome. You speak openly about the imposter monster. Can you share a moment in your life or in your career journey when self-doubt was strong and how you navigated it?
So onto the topic of imposter syndrome and imposter monster. So with regards to imposter syndrome, it's basically a fear of self-doubt, worth, and your value in, something that you're doing, right? It's this constant doubt of, am I good enough? They're going to catch me out. I don't belong here. And I felt that through various stages of my career. But before we go ahead with those examples, I want us to reframe it as the imposter monster. The reason being is that language is very important when we're talking about these things, because syndrome suggests that it's a biologically, genetically inherited disease that you can't get rid of. Labeling it as monster suggests that, like you have a nightmare because you've had a bad day, but it doesn't actually belong there and you need to kind of shoo it away. Or when you have a monster in your dreams, it's usually an indication of something that's impacting you and you need to address it right. So that's why I prefer using imposter monster, because it contextualizes the fear in, something's not right here in terms of what's triggering this. And this is something that I can rectify and tame, should I say. So that's that. So the various stages that I've had it is after graduation. So in the early stages of my career, I was like, who am I in this world and what value do I bring? Because all I know of success is academia, but I don't know anything that sits outside of that. So for me, it was really like, do I really belong in this world of work when my success has only really been attributed towards how well can you pass an exam? like when I start working, they're going to catch me out because it's learn on the job. It's not really something that I can revise for. And then the second major moment of imposter monster was when I started working out in cybersecurity. And that was triggered by me not being in an environment that I'd never been in before, right? I'd gone from chemistry, working at a health tech startup, to now in an environment whereby I have no idea about this space at all. And I had doubts of, did they put me here because I'm the token Black person? I think they made a mistake. I started to have all of these doubts. I was like, maybe they should have picked someone else who's more eligible than me, because it was all new to me. It was like learning a completely new language, right? So I really suffered from that and having to get to grips with this new world that I'd put myself into, all because of a tweet that I saw. I was like, maybe I should go back to medicine because that's what I'm comfortable with. But anyway, over time, I got to grips with the lingo and the language and the rhythm of cybersecurity. So I became familiar with it, and that imposter monster was kind of tamed somewhat. Then my next biggest imposter monster, I would say, is now progressing from analyst to mid-professional, right? So I remember when I was applying for my next role, I applied for my next role thinking it was at the analyst level, but I actually ended up getting promoted to an associate level, which is not what I'd applied for. So they'd sent me an email like, you've been accepted for the associate role. I said, hang on a minute, like I didn't apply for the analyst role. I'm not capable of, leading people below me. I think they've overestimated me. I've only been in cyber for 3 years. And genuinely, that imposter monster thought was I was going to call them and say, hey, do you mind putting me on the analyst pathway? And then after a year, progress into associate. But luckily, I had my board of directors who knocked some sense into me and said, are you silly? Are you really going to call them and say, demote me? Like, are you actually going to do that? So the conversation with my personal board of directors knocked some sense into me. And I said, if anything goes wrong, I'm blaming you. So I put the blame on them if anything were to go wrong. And when I entered into the role, I was like, oh, what was it's not even half as bad as I thought it was. But right, if I'd given into that imposter monster thought, it would have cost me between 30 to 40,000 pounds in my salary. So at that moment, I realized that I can't afford to let imposter monster dictate my life, because it literally could have cost me tens of thousands of pounds and held me back 2 to 3 years in my career.
Wow, the way you define imposter syndrome is quite interesting, honestly. So building on that, what is something people see in the confidence speak on stage that they might not see or realize about the person behind the scenes?
What they don't realize is that I've been speaking on stages for it all started out at church, funnily enough, right? I started speaking at church, reading in mass. I'm Catholic, right? So what people don't realize is that they're seeing the fruit of someone who's been exercising their gift of public speaking for the past 10 years. I've been doing it for a very long time. And if you went to my secondary school and primary school, you'd know I've always been someone who likes to talk. But as of recent, I've only really started to make it into a profession and take it as like an actual career in and of itself. So the version you're seeing now is the person who understands the business of speaking online. So you'll see me speak more, create more content. It looks more polished and, high profile, because there's money to be made in the speaking world. So for me, I do get anxiety and I do get nervousness when I speak. And I actually like it, because for me, when it comes to speaking, I want to ensure I'm the best of the best. And I kind of get worried when I'm perfectly fine, because you can become a bit prideful. I think the nervousness hinders the talk to ensure that you're always like, how do I ensure I'm the best? Have I researched? Have I done this? Have I done that? So you're basically seeing the girl who used to read at church on a Sunday evolve to become a professional speaker with the ambitions of being recognized as one of the world's best. And with that comes a lot of work. If I'm asked to speak for 20 to 30 minutes, it takes me about a month to prepare that particular presentation. And that is me going. And a lot of it is practice. I record myself over and over and over every single day. If I've got a talk that's coming up 1 hour, just talking through the script 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour. So when you see me on stage, just know maybe at least 15 hours have been spent getting to the point of where it is now, where you're like, wow, it's amazing. And I want people to use that as motivation to be like, if I spend 15 hours refining my topic, refining my keynote, over time, you'll get to a point where you will own the stage and be able to speak confidently.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to reiterate that, yes, your work looks polished. I was checking it online. Well done. Let's move on to creating opportunities. Looking back, what strategies helped you create opportunities for yourself rather than waiting for opportunities to come to you?
Yeah, there's a famous phrase that Haley Melendez says, you're too broke to be invisible, basically. And that is true both online and offline. And this is something I've always done, even at university. I was always the person that would put my hand up in the lecture. I didn't care. Like, people were embarrassed. I'd put my hand up and I'd ask that question because that lecturer would remember me. And guess what? Whenever I needed a referral for an interview or a job application, they would refer me because they knew me and I was visible, whether that's within the workplace where I'm attending, meetups, whether it's the after work meetups, showing up and people seeing you physically, whether it's, in my 5 to 9, the speaking engagements as an example. I try and show up physically to the places that I want to speak at in the future, because the in-person human interactions, especially in the AI era, are what's carrying a lot of weight in terms of opportunities and doors being accessed. So visibility in person in the spaces where, if you want to get a job in a specific company or industry, be visible in the spaces where they're having the events at that company. Because how I got my last job, I went to one of their events physically. I talked with people who worked at the company and the recruiters, and they were able, because they'd met me in person, because I followed up, they were able to be like, oh yeah, sure, Yamurai, I'm going to send your CV directly to the hiring manager. That would have been much more difficult if I was just messaging them and they'd never met me before. So that's that. In-person connections are absolutely pivotal. The second key thing is visibility online. The reason why visibility online is so important is because it's basically how people can find you and know what information and know what services you provide, right? So let's think about it. When you go on Google, you're going to search who is the best speaker in cybersecurity, and it's going to show you the best speakers based on SEO. So I apply that same principle, like, okay, if I want to become a highly paid woman in cybersecurity or within the speaking industry, I have to be visible, because the people that I want to book me, to pay me, to hire me, they're going online to look for talent. So this applies from a business perspective in terms of people are now going on ChatGPT and they're going on to search, hey, we're looking for, speakers in X, Y, and Z. Who are they, right? And your visibility online very much determines its impact. And even when you go on Google search, it will now show you profiles of people and their pages directly. From a hiring perspective, what we're seeing now is that recruiters are actually approaching people for jobs to apply for before they look at the people who have actually applied directly. So recruiters are looking on LinkedIn and CV Library, searching for a particular skill set, finding profiles that align with that skill set and approaching them directly to say, hey, Yemurai, we see you've got this skill set. This job application is live. Apply for it and let me know, and I'll invite you for an interview. As compared to people who are just blindly applying online with no LinkedIn profile, no sort of footprint online, good, clean footprint that is, and missing out as a result, because obviously what's happening is a lot more people are applying for the same roles. And it's a lot easier for recruiters to find people who match their skill set that they're looking for rather than sift through the hundreds of CVs. And this has happened to me at least 5 times where they're like, this posting is up. I want you to apply for it. When you've applied for it, let me know. We'll have a call. As compared to send 300 applications to apply.
Thank you so much, Yemurai. You spoke about how you got your last job through networking. Many young people find networking intimidating. What practical advice would you give someone who wants to build meaningful professional relationships?
I would say start online. Try and find online events that align with your career interests and join online, especially if they have a Zoom. It could be a LinkedIn Live or a Google Meet. The reason being is that at least then you can still engage in the conversation You can comment, you can like, and you can connect with others by being virtual and remote, right? So you can still attend online and be like, hey, Yamurai, I love that webinar you did with X, Y, and Z. I love the points you made. I'd love to connect with you. And that's virtually online without you even having to be in person. And also, one of the great things is you can connect with other people who are also on that Zoom call if they make a point, where it could be like Sarah made a comment in the chat and you're like, oh my gosh, Sarah, I really loved your comment. Let's connect on LinkedIn. It can be as simple as that. And online for me, I love it when, people that I look up to do a virtual engagement where I can't attend physically because I can engage in the chat. Right? I've had C-suite leaders who have done a LinkedIn Live and there's only 10 of us and they see my profile because I'm commenting like, oh, I love that comment. Oh, I didn't know this. I'm keen on learning that. And then I connect to them afterwards and they're like, I hope you learned a lot from that. So that's number one, virtually. The second thing is in person, right? So in the UK, we have Eventbrite. And Eventbrite basically is like the page to find out about events. And I would also look at the Excel London, because the Excel London hosts a range of events. For students and people in general, because I get social anxiety as well, surprisingly, even more so now than what I did before. Again, strange. But what I like to do is I like to plan the talks that I'm going to beforehand. So I'll look at the agenda and I will look at, okay, I'm going to attend maybe a max of 3 to 4 talks. The reason why you want to do that is because information overload and feeling overwhelmed can contribute towards the anxiety of networking. So being really strategic in planning the agenda to attend 4 talks that are spread out throughout the day gives you time to process the information that was shared, not overload yourself with information, but during the gaps where you're not doing anything, you can talk to others and say, hey, like, what brings you here? What is your key takeaway, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another thing. Another tip is you can just attend conferences and events for half the day. You don't have to attend for the whole day. If you're like, you know what, first step, I'm gonna do it for half the day, then do it for half the day. That is absolutely fine. So that's that. Now, when it comes to talking to people, the way you really want to go about it is to say, hello, how are you doing? What was some of your key takeaways from today's conversation? I think a lot of the anxiety in networking events is, hi, my name's Yemurai and I'm a cybersecurity specialist and I work here and I do this and I do that. It's, having to talk about yourself can be quite uncomfortable and can make you feel like, it's not the best. That's not even the best way to speak to people anyway, like leading by your job title. What you want to lead is by a shared experience, right? Where you're like, hi, what's your name? What brings you here? What did you take away? And then you can be like, oh, I took away X and Y, but I also took away A and B. So networking from a place of shared experience reduces the anxiety on having to communicate with people based on your accolades and successes, but rather what you took away and the connection. And then naturally that progresses into, so tell me about yourself and what do you do?
That's so true. Thank you so much, Yemurai. Let's move on to AI and the future of work. AI is rapidly transforming the workplace. What opportunities and challenges do you think young people should be paying attention to right now?
Yeah, I think the opportunities, again, I'm going to reiterate the conversation around being able to create employment from the boring and even blue collar jobs, right? For example, creating the social media page of a hairdresser in downtown Harare, as an example, right? They don't realize they need a social media page, but you're in the AI world, you're tech savvy. You're like, hey, Tete, I know you've got this. You have a salon. Let me create a social media page. You've now created an opportunity to become a social media marketer in the most unconventional and uncompetitive way possible. So start thinking creatively about how you can apply your savviness and creativity in new contexts. The second thing is, again, don't focus on job titles, focus on skills. So from a future of work perspective, if you want to get into the AI space, don't think about what is the impact you want to have within, focus on impact rather than jobs, right? So you maybe want to revolutionize the healthcare industry. What are the ways in which you can contribute towards that with the skill set that you have and with AI? Because that looks different in different ways, right? So, for example, you might realize that, every time I go to the doctors, they have a really poor system in streamlining it. Well, that is a space where you could find a career opportunity in that regard rather than just saying, I want to be a software engineer. So it might be one of the biggest bugbears. I go to the hospital, they haven't streamlined this. What's the problem? And what are some of the careers or skills that I could develop to help contribute in closing that gap? Is the second thing. The third thing is interdisciplinary careers, the intersection of roles that sit at the intersection of two disciplines. Those are the ones that are going to be the game changers. If you've got finance knowledge and you understand tech, how do you make sense of that in a way that adds value to a business? Even if you're a nurse, right? Your knowledge of nursing, how can you leverage technology or contribute towards the development of technology within the healthcare space to make your job as a nurse easier? And you even have things like digital nurses. You even have nurses who are no longer involved with the patients one-to-one. They're maybe an advisor or a consultant to the leaders, to the head office within the healthcare sector, advising them on, as a nurse, this is where we need technology. As a nurse, if we implement this technology, it will cause X, Y, and Z impact. So having a business and technical understanding of your role and how your role could be improved with technology and finding opportunity that sits within that is something that I would highly advocate for. I've got an example of this, right? So in the UK, we have the AI Fellowship. And in essence, it's a program that's designed to get medical professionals to be implementers and leaders of AI within their respective field. So they will then work on a project that is AI enabled, but trained by, reviewed by, and refined by pharmacists and nurses. And we're seeing more of these roles appear. So it's understanding in the context of healthcare, I've given those examples, but then what could that look like in maybe teaching as an example? What could that maybe look like in the emergency services as an example? So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Yemurai. You advised young people to focus on skills rather than job titles. So I'll ask again, what skills do you believe will remain valuable regardless of how technology evolves?
I definitely would say communication. But when we talk about communication, you need to understand the different mediums of communication. So communication is things like a presentation, is speaking, is being able to translate from one context to another. So again, in the nursing and tech perspective, the communication aspect is being able to understand the technicalities of the software they're implementing within the healthcare industry, but being able to articulate it to other nurses in a way that they will understand and be receptive to. It might also be social media and written communication as well. I think often we neglect that, but written, how well are you able to write what you're doing in a way that's received by, the public, but also your team in terms of like what you are doing. Another thing is creativity. So remember again how I was thinking outside of the box and the multi-dimensional aspect of something, or as I like to call, slices of a pie. So slice of a pie theory, I'm going to relate it back to the gardening. You have blue collar jobs, or gardening is the pie, but the slices are, you have the laborer, then you have the software engineer who's creating the website, then you have the marketeer who's promoting the services, then you have the clients, right? So whenever you think of a role or an industry you want to go into, break it up into slice of a pie to see what are the other components that make up that slice of a pie and where do you sit within that. So like when we think about medicine, traditionally we think doctor and nurse, but the medicine pie, you have a lawyer, right? Because medical negligence, whatever, you'll have an accountant, finances, etc. You have finance specialists, then you have the lawyers and the doctors and everyone in between. So when it comes to your career, don't just see it as a job, see it as a wider part of a pie, basically.
Wow, thank you so much, Yemurai. Let's move on to reflections and advice. Looking back on your journey so far, what is one defining moment that affirmed you were on the right path? Can you also speak about you attending the AI event at number 10 Downing Street? Thank you.
One defining moment of I knew that I was meant to be here. I think when I started to speak about cybersecurity on the stage, I'm not a technical cybersecurity professional, but I am someone who's able to contextualize cybersecurity in the context of the everyday person. I articulated the cyber dangers of everyday AI products to people, and I saw their eyes light up. I said, yeah, I'm in the right industry. I'm passionate about cybersecurity, even though I'm not the most technically savvy or the engineer. But that passion is enough to move people to recognize, oh, cybersecurity is important, articulating it in a way that's accessible to everyone, and them leaving with action and doing something about it. So the first time I was invited to number 10 was with regards to the AI Opportunities Action Plan. And that was, again, our Mum, I've made it moment, because it was recognition of the value that I bring, not only within the workplace, but online, and educating people about the opportunities within the AI space. It was confirmation that, yes, I am doing the right thing. I am right in having my 9 to 5 and having my 5 to 9 and bringing value in both way, in different contexts. And recognition of that is like, just shows you how when you start something, although it might not make sense now, although you might not know what it looks like now, in 5, 10, 20 years' time, the commitment of doing something that people didn't understand will one day make sense, not only to you, but the people around you and the opportunities that they give to you. When I started this, I didn't think that I'd be invited to number 10 to speak to Keir about my social media page and what I'm doing to promote the work that the government are doing to upskill 10 million people in AI by 2030. That was never in my ideas. It was maybe, oh, I want to work for Google and Microsoft, right? So even our idea of what success looks like is limited when we're doing something, because we don't necessarily know what the future holds and how it will evolve to accommodate the thing that it is that you're currently working for. The communication aspect has got me interviewing, Liz Kendall, who was Secretary of State, the CEO of Salesforce UK and Ireland, getting them to talk to me and to my audience on social media about AI, right? These people are leaders. They're talking to clients, $1 million contracts, but they're asking me to interview them because they recognize the value that I bring in helping them communicate a message that needs to be spread to everyone other than just the people at the top or the people who are in the know.
Well, thank you so much, Yamurai, for that insight. Finally, if every young person watching this interview remembered only one message, what would that message be?
I would say keep going and don't give up, even if it takes you 2 to 3 years, because my journey into cybersecurity took 1.5 years. If I had given up 1 year into what was a 1.5 year long journey, I would not be celebrating my 5-year anniversary in cybersecurity this year.
Thank you so much, Yemurai.
Thanks for watching Dear Future Leaders channel. Don't forget to like, comment and share.